Welcome back to another MobileSentrix tips and tricks. My name is Derek, and today we're going to be showing you how to repair pads on a logic board.
Wait, isn't that extremely time consuming and not really worth it? I mean, what device are we actually doing this on?
We're going to be doing this on a Nintendo Switch that has had a prior repair attempt on the charge board that obviously went horribly wrong.
Do you know what they're going to say, right? It's definitely not worth the time and effort to fix it. And given that it has had a prior repair attempt, who knows what might be wrong with it?
I know, but it's always nice to fix something instead of just throwing it away. Besides, it's a great learning opportunity.
Alright, let's take a look and see what we're dealing with. Wow, that is bad, and it's definitely not worth the time. I mean, how are you gonna even fix that?
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but I've fixed worse.
Alright, what's the first thing we gotta do?
The first thing that we have to do is find where those pads connect. Most of the time, it's fairly obvious.
I'm assuming that we need to make sure that whatever repair we do makes contact with those points, but what are we going to use to do that?
Great question. I'm going to get a brand new scalpel, and I need to carefully scrape away the top coat to reveal the copper trace.
Are you going to have to do that with all of them?
No, not all of them. Some of them dive directly into the board below where the old pad was, and others might be connected to another pad.
So what are we going to use in place of the pads that are missing?
Got this pad repair kit that I found on MobileSentrix.com.
This looks really tedious, but how are you going to get it to connect?
I'm going to add solder to one side of each pad. As you might notice, one side receives the solder better than the other side. It kind of has a coating on one side, which doesn't really allow the solder to stick. So I'm going to flip over the pads so that the side that has solder is facing down to make sure that we get a solid connection with those traces.
That makes sense, but how are you going to secure these? Aren't they going to come off when you put on the new board?
No, we're going to use UV mask to kind of glue them in place.
But doesn't that area have to remain perfectly flat? How are you going to do that?
You'll see. I've got some tricks. As you can see, I'm taking my time to align each of these pads with the traces, and also making sure that they're spaced out far enough from each other that they're not connecting. These pads are about the same size of the recess in the logic board where the original pads were before they got torn off. So it helps in making them practically flush.
With all this flux and solder, isn't the UV mask going to have a hard time?
Yes, it definitely would if it weren't for some good old 99.9% isopropyl alcohol. I'll give it a good thorough cleaning to ensure that all the flux and solder isn't present.
I see that you're being really generous with the amount of UV mask. Won't that create lumps?
Yes, it'll start out that way, but I need to make sure that all of the edges are secure so that they don't move.
That makes sense, but how are you going to get rid of the lumps?
For that, I'm going to be using a grinder.
A grinder? Isn't that kind of dangerous? And isn't all of this work a bit much and even worth it?
Just got to be careful now that I've cured it with the UV light. I'm going to take the grinder in slowly and steadily, removing the mask that I don't need, and work my way down to the pads. You could technically do this with a razor blade. It would just take a lot of time.
This is already taking a lot of time.
I know, but it will be worth it.
I doubt it.
Can you at least see where this is headed? As I slowly grind away all the UV mask, the pads come back into view, and as you can tell, it's basically flush now with the board.
Yeah, it actually doesn't look half bad, but I'm still thinking it's a waste of time though. And I wonder if there's an easier way.
Yeah, there's definitely other ways. If any of you have other ways to do this, leave it in the comments below.
How are you making this so that the solder doesn't just move and squeeze out from under the pads?
Great point. And something I forgot to mention, I'm using 217 solder paste on the pads. And when I go to solder the port, I'm going to be using a lower melting solder like a 183 or 158. By doing this, I will hopefully prevent the solder from wanting to melt and move so much.
Why just not use 138 solder paste? Isn't it easier?
Yes, it's easier, but it's not as strong. I do like to add a little to the pins on the port to ensure a solid connection to the pads, as the second row of pins is a blind solder.
But if you're adding low melt, what's going to make the port strong?
I'm again going to use 217 on the legs of the port. That way it'll be really strong.
This all seems a bit extra. Are you sure it's worth it?
I'm sure I won't hear the end of it if not.
I will say that's actually looking pretty good.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Would you look at that?
Oh, calm down. I'm sure we can figure it out.
What kind of tech doesn't look around a board before working on one?
Apparently this guy.
That component that looks like it blew up. What is that?
That's the fuel gauge I see for the battery charging. Kinda important for this to turn on.
Is it easy to replace?
It's not difficult, it's just heat up and remove the old one, prep the pads, and put a new one in its place.
Now that you've done that, is there anything else we should test?
Yeah, maybe we should test around the motherboard to see if there's any other issues.
I'm sure we're gonna find some.
Dang, we've got a short on the P13 line.
I told you. And what does that mean?
Means all I can do is hope that it's a capacitor or the P13 chip, or...
Or what? Does it mean that I've been right this whole time?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's pull the components and double check for a short.
I bet it's still gonna be there. What would that mean?
Means that a high current made its way to the CPU, and it's a lost cause at this point, from my knowledge.
Told you it would be a waste of time.
I guess you could say that, but it was fun for me regardless.
I guess we are confused as to what the meaning of fun is. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already.
Let us know if there's something that you'd like to see in the future. Thanks a ton for watching. We'll see you in the next video.
Is this an argument or just the start of it?